Welcome back to the AndroidVirus and Sean show. I am AndroidVirus. I have Sean on the end with us.
How we doing?
Good. And we have Josh, I don't want to mispronounce your name, Zeman or Zeman? How do we say it?
Zeman.
Zeman, all right. So we have Josh Zeman on. I've been trying to get him on for a couple of weeks. He had a little bit of an emergency last time. Josh is the writer and director of the 2009 documentary Cropsey, which delves into the mystery surrounding the disappearance of 5 missing children and the real-life boogeyman that was linked to it. Today, Josh has created a brand new documentary that goes deep into the urban legends and investigates the origin of these stories. The documentary is called Killer Legends, which can be seen on Chiller TV. Josh, welcome to the show, man. Thank you so much for calling in.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Much appreciated.
Absolutely, man.
Not a problem. So are you currently busy working on anything right now?
Right at the moment, we just finished Killer Legends. It just premiered the other week, and now right now, weirdly enough, I'm working on a couple of things. One of the things I'm working on is a documentary about, it's not very horrific, but it's called, it's about the search for the 52 Hertz whale. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever heard about this whale, but there's this whale that the U.S. government discovered back in the late and early 90s. And basically, the U.S. government has this thing called the SOSUS, which is this hydrophonic array, this array of microphones that they have in the world's oceans. And they started it in the Cold War. They used to listen for Russian subs using, sound waves underwater because of the way that water travels underwater, the way that sound travels underwater. And so basically, they heard this sound. At the time they were tracking whales, but most whales call out at a frequency between 15 and 25 hertz. They heard this thing that was calling out at 52 hertz. They didn't know what it was, and they sent the sound over to this guy, Dr. Watkins, at the Woods Hole University, and he came back and he said, the sound is, in fact, a whale, but it's only one whale that's been calling out at a frequency that no other whale can hear. And they call it the loneliest whale in the world. And they stopped, nobody listened to it from 94 on, and so we've been kind of engaging the U.S. Navy and a couple of other folks at NOAA to try and help us find this whale. So we're kind of going to go out on an expedition to find it, hopefully next year.
Very cool. And are you still doing that with Rachel Mills?
That one, no. But with Rachel, actually, more kind of in line with Cropsey. We're doing something on. Are you guys familiar with the Gilgo Beach murders?
The Gilgo Beach murders.
Yeah,
I am
not. What those are? So basically, a couple of years ago, they found 10 dead escorts along a highway in Long Island.
I heard of it.
Yeah. And so they never solved the case, and they believe that, it's either one serial killer or 2 serial killers, crazy enough, operating in Long Island and basically kind of, killing these escorts. And what's really interesting is that in a lot of ways this case, it's kind of like your kind of old school serial killer cases with prostitutes, but here it's a little bit different because it's a lot of ways it's how the internet has changed killing. For more or less, because these girls are going on the internet as escorts, and that's how people are getting them through Backpage, and that's how this serial killer has enticed these girls through Backpage, and so it's pretty interesting. And,
I'm aware of it. I saw it on the news for sure.
Yeah, and so it's been 3 years now, and they still have not. They still haven't, caught this guy. Yet there's all these escorts still operating in the same area where this guy, theoretically continues to operate.
And just throwing all caution to the wind. It sounds like.
Yeah, and so, but it's just amazing to me. In speaking to a lot of serial killer experts, they're saying that at any time in New York City there's 6 operating serial killers, which is just nuts to me, and. Long Island has this very weird history of serial killers with this guy, Joel Rifkin, and another guy named Robert Schulman, who was kind of doing the same thing. So, I don't know, Long Island's so weird, and just the fact that, they can't catch this guy. He's still out there. The press has kind of died down, and now, he's going to come out again. So we're doing a documentary, but it's also a hybrid. It's half documentary, half narrative.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. Well, we have kind of something on our own, right, Sean?
Yeah.
In New Mexico.
Actually, that kind of brought me up something here just off the top of my head. I don't know if you remember this, Andrew, but the thing is that they've been having this mystery out in the Albuquerque area, out on the west side. There was a lot of bodies found not too long ago. Like, was it a couple years ago? The West Mesa thing, murders.
Yeah. Let me tell you about it, Josh. I don't know if you're familiar with Albuquerque. If you've seen Breaking Bad, which everybody has, maybe you have, maybe you haven't. That's filmed here in Albuquerque. So the west side of the city, it's desert, it's barren. I mean, and so what they found in 2009, a lady was walking her dog. There was a new housing development being built, and her dog was, tugging at something, and the dog found a femur. So the lady called, the police, obviously, and what they found was a mass grave of 11 women, the remains, buried in 2009.
Whoa.
In the West Mesa desert of Albuquerque, New Mexico. No suspects have been identified. In the case of the serial killer, there's a serial killer responsible. They moved it up to 11 because one of the women was pregnant. Yeah. So they were all prostitutes, all known prostitutes and drug addicts. I think they were all pretty much Hispanic, right, Sean? Maybe a couple of Anglo ones, but it's really weird. The scariest thing that I saw on it was they had an aerial view, like a Google Maps view of the area. And, before the murders happened, you see the area is just barren and whatever. And then after the murders, you see tire tracks just going to the same spot that have just been made. Yeah, over and over. And it's unsolved. People still don't know what to make of it. Really, at all.
Mm-hmm. And do they think it's like one guy, or do they think it's more than that?
They don't even know. They have no clues.
A couple of years ago, I guess there was maybe I forget the whole thing, but they thought that maybe this guy has been killed because there was this known. I guess what was I'm gonna butcher the story up there, but it's basically. Several years prior to them finding these bodies, there was a guy who was murdered by the bodyguard of a prostitute out on the west side there, who might have fit this type of thing, So a lot of people believe that this guy is either gone or dead, or maybe already in prison and dead. Already. There hasn't been anything since, but it's still just one of these type of cases that have, just really kind of it's just a head scratcher. We don't know how it happened. We don't know what the circumstances are. We don't know if the guy's gone. But it's just one of those weird things. Almost it kind of that came to my mind when I was watching Cropsey, things like that. Like, this is how stories and legends get started. Is things like that.
When you don't have an answer to a crime, then because there's all these possible answers. That's like prime breeding ground for like urban legend, because then you could take that story and mold it into anything you want.
Sure. That's absolutely true. Well, we had a similar experience, Josh, on our show, I would say about a month ago. A friend of mine in downtown Albuquerque, he's a maintenance man, does air conditioners and whatnot. And he took a picture of a lady on the side of a road, a homeless lady who was draped in a lot of blankets and clothes. You couldn't see her face, but you could see that she had dreadlocks. And you can see her hands, and if you zoomed in on her hands almost looked like bone-like and black. And it was a very spooky picture. Sean is, Catholic, and I'm, a believer, and we were really hard-pressed on running with it because we didn't know if this lady was like a witch, voodoo, whatever the case may be. And the reason why we say that is because here in Albuquerque, I was talking to one of my buddies, and another guy kind of chimed in our conversation. He goes, "Are you talking about that crazy lady who lives downtown and her blankets are dreaded into her hair?" He goes, "She yells at people and throws like dust at them." I'm like, whoa. So what had happened was we actually had a girl who was listening to our show who advocates for homeless people. And she had called in and said, "No, this lady's severely schizophrenic. She doesn't bathe. She doesn't take showers. All these clothes are a shield and a guard, and for her to be that way as a shield and a guard as to not be raped by other homeless men on the street. So we had this little thing where we almost had our own urban legend, like we were scaring the shit out of ourselves.
I saw that picture.
When the
that
answer
picture
is
looked
something
kind of crazy.
Did you get the picture?
Yeah, that picture looked nuts.
That was her. That was her. We were just.
And it's just, and that's also when I was thinking, I'm like, is this how urban legends, is this how stories get started? Because it's like, well, where we think there might be some weird magic, and I remember in Cropsey how it was kind of like a lot of things that came up, like, oh, that they do satanic witchcraft type practices out there in the middle of the woods. You know, it's like wherever our minds can go with that, that's where these things just blow up. And is this what was done, you know, hundreds of years ago to keep children out of the woods and out of different things? They would make up these stories because maybe there were few people that were indeed nuts or whatever. You make stories, you keep children out of that, and this is where legends grow. And that's what I found fascinating, just fascinating with all this type of stuff.
Well, it's also interesting is because, of course, you know, there's all those homeless people in Cropsey that the parents are trying to keep the kids away from. You know, there's always urban legends about homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, for
you
sure.
know, and because we don't know who they are, what they might be, what they're into. You know, that's the whole thing. You know.
Is there any updates on the story with Andre Rand and any of the missing kids?
You know, after the movie, we got a lot of calls from a lot of different people, and especially a lot of people who were like, "Oh, I think I may have been not attacked, but like Andre Rand tried to get me," or like things like that. We've seen a lot of those.
Yeah.
But no updates on any missing bodies or anything.
No, but you know what happened? We did get a call from some guy who called us. He was like in Staten Island. It's a lot of Revolutionary War stuff. So they do a lot of like prospecting. You know, like looking for muzzles and things like that. You know, from the Revolutionary War. And he, you know, because of the number that we put on the end of the movie, he called me up and he says, "Hey, I found some bones." And so he brought us to the spot where he found these bones, and you know, he's like, and I called the police. And like maybe 20 minutes later, there were like 30 cops there, detectives, everybody going through the bones. And we're sitting there in the middle of the woods taking pictures of the bones and trying to send them to the medical examiner's office to see if they were actually human bones. And none of the cops could actually send it from their phone because they didn't have an iPhone at the time. And so I sent it to the medical examiner's office, and they came back and they said, "Oh, it's just dog bones."
Oh, wow. Well, we had a serial killer here in New Mexico. If you travel south, I would say about 3-4 hours, right, Sean? There's a place called Elephant Butte Lake. Elephant Butte Lake is a man-made lake where it's supposed to store water. Then they release the gates to give Texas some water. There was a guy down there named by the name of David Parker Ray who had a torture shack and who was torturing women and dumping their bodies in Elephant Butte Lake. And I don't think I ever told this to you, Sean, but, you know, people go down there, go to the lake and party for 4th of July weekend or whatever the case may be. So we're down there, we're hanging out, and an ear floated up in the water. And we didn't call the police or anything, but my friend was a nurse, and she says, "I'm going to take it to she wrapped it up, put it on ice, and she said, "I'm going to take it to see if this is," because it was so, like, wilted and bloated, you know what I mean? And it had, like, hair on it. It was really weird. Yeah.
That's so very Lynchian.
Yeah, it was really odd because I would say east of Elephant Butte Lake, you have White Sands Missile Range, right? White Sands Missile. Oh, you've been to White Sands? Okay. So if you sit out at Elephant Butte Lake at night, now I'm not saying they're UFOs, but I guess the technical term is an unidentified flying object. It was a flying object that we could not identify. And it just kind of brought up that whole spooky thing, like, okay, what's this hairy, bloated ear doing washing up on the shores of Elephant Butte Lake? It was just really odd.
Did you ever find out what it was?
I didn't talk to her after that. She never found out what it was. She gave it to one of the forensic or pathologists over there, and I don't think they even ever got back to her on what it was. We never found out.
There's this new movie coming out. It played at Fantastic Fest, which is like one of the best festivals around. And what the hell is the name of? Oh, it's called Mirage Men.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it's directed almost. He's not a folklorist, this guy from the UK, but he knows a lot about folklore, and he knows about a couple of the people who we speak about in Cropsey. This guy Bill Ellis, who's like one of the most amazing folklorists around, and he did this movie called Mirage Men, and it's about a guy who works for the U.S. government in the Air Force who goes around telling all these like UFO experts that what they know is real, but the government can't publicly acknowledge it. But he goes to all these people and said, "You're right. Everything that you write about is completely true. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say, yes, it's true, but we can't make it public. But I'm going to feed you information." And the question of Mirage Men is whether or not this guy is really giving them the truth, or whether he's trying to further more disinformation. Because apparently, like one of the very early UFO things, some guy had apparently, located a UFO near White Sands, and what he had really seen was the beginnings of the Stealth Project. So they didn't want him to give away secrets about the Stealth Project, so they're like, yeah, it's UFOs. You're exactly right, but we can't tell anybody, so just keep it on the DL.
Yeah.
And that's what this guy's job is, to kind of give people disinformation, telling them that UFOs are in fact real when it's in fact totally not real. Interesting.
Yeah. Now, I have a question for you. You posted, I don't know if it was you who posted on your Cropsey Facebook page, the case of Terra Calico. Was that you, or did somebody run the page for you?
That thing freaks me out, that picture.
You know that happened here.
Right. I didn't know that until you guys had mentioned that. So what's the deal with that photo? That photo is scary as hell.
Nobody can either prove or disprove it. There is, I guess you could say, tale that she was ran over by some high school kids by accident and they hit her body.
Right.
But you know that. Yeah, but that that picture, they thought they thought was another kid who ended up finding his remains. He went missing hiking, and they ended up finding his remains. So it wasn't that kid.
Right.
The weird story about Terra Calico, and I want to get into this with you about how these things affect the families. I personally, Albuquerque is a big but yet small town. We have a population of 500,000. Okay, it's a paranormal hotbed, but it attracts a lot of weirdness as well. And it was just kind of weird that you'd posted that picture of Terra Calico, and we were actually going to be interviewing you because I had a run-in with Terra Calico's family. I used to work at a kids camp, and Terra Calico's nephew, who I won't name right now, was about 13, 14 years old, and he was helping run the kids camp as well. And the kids went to lunch, or they went on a field trip, so me and him were, supposed to straighten things up, pick up, organize some stuff, and we got really hungry. So I said, "Hey man, let's go get a burger somewhere." He's like, "All right, let's go." So we got a burger. He was a really nice guy, and we came back, and I almost got fired. His mom completely flipped out. How dare somebody take her 14-year-old son off the premises to get a hamburger and buy him lunch, And it's funny because I started working with this kid 10 years later, and he's like, "Man, I'm really sorry that happened. My mom's a freak." And I was like, "Ugh." And he goes, "They're completely scarred, paranoid." And he goes, from the situation all these years later.
Yeah, I mean, dealing with, I've produced a lot of movies, so I've dealt with crazy actors and I've been in a lot of crazy situations, but dealing with somebody whose child has disappeared and there's no answer, it's the worst. I mean, how do you relate? How do you speak to them? How do you even comprehend what they've dealt with and what they're dealing with? And it's
as the guys will tell you, and as the guy says in Cropsey, it's one thing, where you can, to have a child who's died, and that's horrific. But the missing of a child is even worse, because there's no place where you can grieve, or you don't even know what's happened. You always have hope that maybe the child is still alive and it's going to come back one day, and so it's really the worst thing imaginable. And it was one of the toughest things for us to deal with when we made Cropsey, and we were going to speak to the father of Holly Ann Hughes. We went to him that day, and we opened up the door and we're like, "Hey, how are you? How you doing? We really appreciate you talking." He said, "I wasn't going to talk to you, but Holly Ann came to me in a dream last night and said it was okay." And
wow.
I don't believe in a lot of stuff, but it's just like, it's freaky. And
yeah,
as you know, Hollywood loves to do everything they can, to kind of exploit the dead child thing, with all the horror movies that we have and everything. And so, but when you're in it in real life, it's fucked up.
It is, man.
It's crazy.
Well, we were and going into like real life stuff and being fucked up, let's get into a little bit about Faces of Death.
Oh yeah, you guys were talking about that on your other show, and it was very interesting to me, because that, I deal in the world of documentaries, and what we try to do with Cropsey is, I call it like the reverse Blair Witch, where Blair Witch tries to make a fake story and tries to make it seem real. And that's kind of what freaks you out, right? Because, oh my God, can this be true? And what we like to do with Cropsey, and what I like to do with some of my stuff, is I like to take real stories and kind of tell the story in a cinematic way, and make it feel more like a movie. And so when you bring up stuff like Faces of Death that sits in this world that was very important to me as a kid, is this real or is this not? And look at us as a society today with reality TV. Like, is it real or is it not? And so those Faces of Death was like really big, but really, instrumental in, I think, so many people, and in the way in which we talk about what's true and not true as to what we're being presented with.
Yeah, well, and Faces of Death, I mean, as a kid, when it's one of those movies. Like, I think we're all about the same age, but I remember being a kid and going to the old mom and pop video stores, and you were able to walk out with any movie. For the most, if it wasn't a porn movie, I mean, they pretty much rented it to you. We rented Faces of Death 1, 2, and 3 as 12 and 13-year-olds when our parents were at work during the summer, and we just had a little marathon. And yeah, I was scarred. Absolutely, it changed me. But at the same time, reading about it more, the urban legend of it, you realize that it's a Mondo film first and foremost. And what is real and what isn't? We found out that a lot of it was staged, a lot of it was fake.
Yeah.
Great gore effects though, and some of it was real. At the same time.
Yeah. And that was the fun as the kid was trying to figure out what was what, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It was,
exactly.
It was just heartbreaking to watch the guy parachute into a lake of crocodiles. I'm like, oh my God, this isn't happening. Like, how tragic, and sure as shit it was fake, but still at the same time, it's, at the age of the internet, you definitely are starting to uncover a lot of stuff. Now, you're saying that you didn't see Traces of Death.
No. What was that one?
Traces of Death was kind of an answer to Faces of Death, but it was real. Now, it later came out that about maybe 5 to 10% of it was fake. Most of it was just stuff from war-torn countries, some crime scene footage, a lot of pictures, way more brutal than Faces of Death. And what made it more brutal than Faces of Death was Traces of Death loved the guy who narrated it had a voice distorter on. So he made his voice like really low and and then they were playing death metal music through the whole thing, like Cannibal Corpse and whatever death metal bands they could find. So you're just watching these death scenes to music like and just this crazy metal music. And I told Sean that we're an uncensored show. Back when I watched it when I was 18 years old, I decided to take a hit of acid while watching this. Yeah, and and as coincidence would have it, we left the house that we were watching it, and we witnessed a car accident right in front of us.
Oh, right. I remember you saying that. That's right.
Yeah, and fucking crazy, man. Just insane. And I can't handle real gore now. I I've watched tons of horror movies, but I mean, real gore, forget it. I can't handle it.
Yeah, I'm not too good with that either. Funny enough.
I've got a question for you, Josh. I've been, I'm one of these guys that, unlike Aaron here, who loves horror movies. I've never really been into horror movies just because I find them like kind of silly, things like that. My parents, who used to act a long time ago when we were kids, they would show us like, oh, that's fake. They would say this is makeup and stuff. So there was kind of that campy stuff. That's why I never I thought like Nightmare on Elm Street and things like that were a lot more funnier than scary. But the actual documentaries like you have with Cropsey or when you were discussing the stuff like Killer Legends, things like that actually scare me more. Are you a big fan of like the horror movies, or do you kind of have like you're like, well, that's kind of campy or whatever attitude towards things, or No,
I'm right there with you. I don't like. I'll be honest. I don't like horror films. To me, they're all like a little bit too much and a little bit too over the top. And so I remember when we were making Cropsey, we were like, all right, you want to fucking scare a kid? Watch this. And then when we meant that, we meant the footage of the mental institution. We're like, you want to see a horror movie? We're like, fuck Freddy Krueger and all this other stuff. Watch this and you tell me you're not freaked out. And so we knew what we had was like powerful shit, And then it was funny because, that's when Ryan Murphy, a couple of years later, by the way, he totally just somebody called me up and said, I think you should be watching American Horror Story because they totally ripped off Cropsey and made this whole season about this mental institution. And he did I guess, imitation is the, most sincere form of flattery. But, he decided, to make that whole last episode. I've never seen it because it would drive me nuts to see it. But, he told me, or he said in all these interviews that, that was a big inspiration for him to create this kind of real horror. And so for me, social horror, like you're seeing there, is so much worse because it's real, because this shit can happen. There's if you ever get a chance to go online, you can watch that whole Geraldo thing, and it gets like worse and worse in some stages. Like there's one amazing thing. Geraldo, now we know Geraldo is like also the guy who's done like all the the worst like devil worshipping stuff. But back in the day when Geraldo went in there was a kid named Bernard Carnabello. He was 18 years old. He interviews him and he's like, "What do you think of the conditions in here?" And Bernard seems like he's mentally disabled, but Bernard has MS, so he has muscular dystrophy. There's nothing wrong with his brain. Yet he was misdiagnosed and put in there. And so this kid is living his life with all these mental patients, and he's totally fine. He just has muscular dystrophy. So,
God.
So Geraldo, kudos to Geraldo, ends up adopting the guy right there and then. So he adopts this guy, Bernard Carabello, to take him as because he's a ward of the state, and so he adopts him, and Bernard ends up getting his law degree and ends up becoming an advocate for handicap rights.
Oh my God!
Right.
And so, one of the only great things that Geraldo ever did was that, and then also at the same time he was so affected, he went in and he adopted this kid out of it.
Well,
wow.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, man. When Cropsey came out a while back, I'd seen it on the ID channel, and I just ran across it. I'm like, this is interesting, because I love documentaries. I love horror documentaries, and I'm watching it. And I remember specifically, it was me and my wife watching it, and my kids were staying the night at my parents' house. Me and my wife, we were just gonna have a quiet night to ourselves. And that footage, I shit you not, man, kept me up at night. And I don't I don't get scared by much. I like to say I'm pretty desensitized because I am a huge horror buff. But
Right.
that I remember that as being one of the last things that kind of I would go to sleep and then I would see Andre Rand drooling and I'd just kind of wake up and look around my house, or I'd go to sleep and I see these poor kids rocking back and forth, and I'm like, that scene scarred my soul, dude. So whatever
Awesome.
you tried to, you accomplished it, man, because
Yeah.
and it's kind of weird because go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, the interesting thing is that in thinking about it, there's like a whole theory behind it of why you're so scared about this stuff, and it's also part of the same theory of like why a lot of urban legends and horror stories always start with mental institutions, right? They do, like Halloween, right? Didn't he? He was from a mental. It always starts like an escape mental patient, and so the idea from, as folklorists say, is that as human beings, like, there's monsters, right? And we put monsters like, Freddy Krueger in like a slightly different category, although Freddy Krueger, right, is born of the nun who got locked in to the mental institution, right? And she got raped by 1,000, So there's this like thing that we have where we fear the mentally ill. And the reason we fear the mentally ill is because they seem, quote unquote, so normal, yet they act so strange. And the whole thing is what you're doing is you're almost looking at a reflection of yourself because you look normal. And so what you're saying is the big fear and the underlying fear is that one day, can I wake up and be crazy? Could I suddenly wake up and be drooling and be nuts and want to kill children? And so that's why we have this crazy, deep-seated fear of the mentally ill, because it could be us very easily.
I kind of saw where you picked a couple things. You picked this up on one of the segments in Killer Legends. And we won't go through chronological order, but we will go through it, however we see fit. Now, you did the thing on the Hookman, right? The Moonlight Murders and all that fun stuff. Now, I mean, spooky as shit, right? I mean, it was scary. I mean, you guys pretty much found the spot where you think a woman was murdered. And, they make a movie, The Town That Dreaded Sundown, surrounding that movie. And basically what happened was this town decides to have a screening in their park. What? It's like what's the? It's like we talked about the West Side Murders. It's like, okay, somebody makes a movie about the West Side Murders where we live, and it's just like, okay, 30 years from now or whatever, or no, that was back in the 40s, but 60 years from now, they're going to have a movie and screen it at the same spot. It was crazy. It was almost like the whole town was just fucked up and weird.
Well, it's true, but at the same, like for me, it's, as ridiculous as it sounds, it totally makes sense. And that's the whole thing about it, right? Okay, so, and you'll see this this is like what a lot of folklorists talk about. They talk about this thing called legend tripping, right? And this is what everybody does in every town. Do you guys know what this is, legend tripping?
No.
You've done it. It's where, as a kid, young adult, even, as an adult, you'd say, all right, let's go to the old haunted house. Let's check it out. Let's see what's going on. Or you go to the mental institution. Or you go to the train tracks where the ghost train is. Or you go to that place where all lovers leap. Like, you go and you try and, experience what happened back in the day. You go to, scare the shit out of yourselves. You usually do it as kids, and sometimes, you smoke a joint and go there and do it. Or sometimes you bring a girl there, and she's like, oh, hold me, getting her pants or whatever. So we all do it, and it's called legend tripping. And all the ghost hunting shows, that's all they're doing is legend tripping. And it happens in every society, in every culture. In Japan they do it. Sometimes it's thought of as like a child rite of passage. You go to the cave of the bear, to see if you'll live through the night. It's all the same shit. Folklore is called legend. Yeah.
We started talking about, we were going to bring it up this week on the shows, and I think it would be completely appropriate to bring it up with you. Are you familiar with the Japanese suicide forest?
Of course. Thing's amazing. I just saw pictures of that recently. It's incredible. So you go to that forest and check it out and be like, I wonder what's going to happen. So it's legend tripping, and basically that's what's happening in the town in Texarkana, Texas. The whole town is going out and collectively legend tripping because there's a movie that's being shown in the exact spot or the same park where the kids were killed. Basically, you're reliving the experience, and when the whole town comes out, that's what they do. Now, the crazy thing is Ryan Murphy, again, don't ask me how, he decides that he's going to make a movie which is about a copycat killer coming out from the screenings of the movie, coming out from the legend tripping.
Oh,
and
wow.
So it's very meta. It's because you always say like, well, you go and you legend trip back to the haunted house, and you always turn to the girlfriend or your friends and say, guys, what if he's still here? And so basically that's what this guy did, and that's what kind of makes it amazing. So this town, whether or not the town wants to embrace the murders that happen, acknowledge them, or whether the town tries to escape it can't because it's unsolved. And so the story keeps playing in on itself over and over again, and that's what happened with the director, Charles B. Pierce, of the movie The Town That Dreaded Sundown. The crimes happened in the 40s. In the 70s, he decides to redo it and make a movie about it, and does it in this kind of very half doc, half narrative way.
Yeah,
he says the guy could still be roaming around. To all the kids in the 70s who lived in Texarkana, Texas, when he said the killer could still be out there, all these kids were like, oh shit. And suddenly, it's like the murders are happening all over again. And so now when Ryan Murphy is going around and making another movie about a killer, a copycat killer coming out of the screenings, it's happening again. It's like the real life, Freddy Krueger, where he's come back, And so
how soon is too soon? What do you think?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, really, how soon is too soon? I mean, you got a found footage film that was just made. It was about Gacy's house, right? Mm-hmm. And then you got movies about Ed Gein, played by Kane Hodder, who plays Jason. You got I don't know how many movies about Ted Bundy, that are just completely exploiting what happened. And not in your case, you're not exploiting shit, man. I can tell you that right now. I mean, you're a true documentarian, and I love the way you present it. There's no exploitation there. But it's just like with these filmmakers, I do find it a little. There's two things that scare me in this world: serial killers and things that I cannot see. So if I have a paranormal experience,
let me add something to that. People who love serial killer movies.
There you go.
Those people scare the shit out of me.
I don't get it, bro. I mean, there's a creepy macabre to it that attracts all of us, and we talked a little bit over email about people's fascination with death. And
yeah,
I love watching. There's a show, I don't think they play it anymore, but there was a show that used to come on the ID channel called Most Evil. Are you aware? You remember that show?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this doctor basically has a scale that he made, and he rates serial killers.
Right. The depravity scale or something like that, or the evil scale.
Sure. Yeah, and and he's like, this is what, he's a doctor, but it's like, it's so interesting to watch it from a scientific standpoint, but I fucking hate serial killers. I'm just like, I just don't, it's just spooky, bro, to me. That's one of those things.
It freaks me out, all these people who the Gacy movies especially, for some reason, those really rub me the wrong way, because it's they on the cover you'll see Gacy dressed as a clown with a big knife. But if you know the story, it's too easy to say that it's more interesting to talk about how Gacy never did that as dressed like a clown, but how he would go around and entertain kids separately from being a serial killer. Gacy, however, did dress up. He used to dress up like a cop, and then go to what's called a place called Bug Park in Chicago. He used to dress up like a cop in this park where all these young kids cruising to sell themselves for blowjobs and stuff. And he would like grab the kid by the wrist and said, "You're arrested for soliciting," and then he'd throw handcuffs on the kid, and then he'd take the kid back to his house. So he would dress up and do this, but he would dress up as a cop, not as a clown.
That makes it a lot worse. Just a lot worse, in my opinion.
Well, he's filthy, man. Just him and Ted Bundy. I mean, Gary Ridgway as well. But I for a minute, I used to feel a little bit sorry for Dahmer. He just seemed like a really lonely guy, even though he committed atrocities. But then I watched a Dahmer documentary on Netflix.
Right.
And,
a lot of people talk about that documentary. I've never seen it. Is it any good?
It's really good, man. It's called The Dahmer Files.
That's what I hear.
It's really good. You should really check it out. I mean, it's an amazing documentary. And, I felt sorry for the guy. Obviously, he was very lonely, but, at the same time, I mean, obviously, these people are mentally ill. And I don't even know where to go with it, man. It's just serial killers, like I said, and things that I cannot see spook me. There's some crazy things here in New Mexico. Are you familiar with, I guess you could say the Santa Fe prison riots in Santa Fe, New Mexico?
What happened there?
Worst prison, most violent prison riot in U.S. history that does not get a lot of recognition due to the brutality of what happened in this prison when these guys rioted. There's a lot of ghost hunters that go up there. I don't know if you know of that show called The Dead Files. This girl, she's a medium or whatever, and her and this cop go up there, and she's like, this is the most evil place I've ever been to, and I've been doing this and been to thousands of haunted locations, and this place creeped me out the most. Now, this is 50 miles northeast of us where I live. They shut the prison down because of the riots. But when they shut the prison down, they had to clean it up. All the guards got raped. I don't know how many men died, but very unsettling deaths. Very unsettling. Castrations, and then they wake them up with smelling salts so they can feel the pain. There's still a burnt figure in the floor of a guy in a fetal position of a guy that they set on fire. There's still shovel marks in the floor where they decapitated people. Now, what they found is this land that the prison was built on, probably 300-400 years ago, when the Spaniards came up through southern New Mexico and settled, they had a camp for the Native Americans there. And the Native Americans rose up, and they did the same thing that was described in the prison. So there's some shit there, man, that...
It's funny that you mentioned that only because, who's the master of, it's total Stephen King.
Right.
To me, because Stephen King loves to do like, something's happening here now that's bad, but 100 years ago it was the Native Americans. I mean, that's because that's Pet Sematary, but he does it with like so many different things, and it's always... but notice, right, it's because of the bad shit that we did to the Native Americans, how horrifically we treated them.
Yeah.
That it allows this kind of spiritual revenge to happen.
Sure.
And so there's always a similar narrative that's running through, especially when it comes to Native Americans, conquistadors, as well, the Spanish as well.
Speaking of which, we got a guy who likes to call into our show frequently, and so happens he is a Native American. So his name's Will. I'm going to bring him on the line real quick.
Awesome.
Hey, Will, you're on the line with Josh Zeman and me and Sean. What you got, man?
Hey guys, nice to meet you, Josh. I got a chance to see your movie. I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff. I'm also kind of a John Wayne Gacy fan, not actually the opposite way of what you're saying, just kind of his normalcy in society and how he functioned with everyone and how he got away with all this.
Yeah. Right. Well, I spoke to, first of all, there's definitely some interesting stuff if you do the research about what's going on in Chicago right now. There's these filmmakers who are doing this documentary about how Gacy was hooked up with the son of a mobster. And the son of this mobster, was a real sick guy. And, the whole thing is that Gacy was able to do so much because he was hooked into politics. And, that was, the police had come to his house numerous times. I met a guy who went to his house numerous times. And so, it's one of those things where law enforcement kind of definitely dropped the ball because he was so hooked into politics, but also hooked up into the mob. A lot of it has to do with the Chicago machine, and that's what allowed Gacy to get away with it.
Yeah, and
wasn't that also how Bundy wasn't that also like, because not necessarily that Bundy had a bunch of connections, but he was, through universities and his clean-cut way of kind of being like that, wasn't that a kind of why people didn't suspect him right off the bat with his stuff too, just because he led a completely different lifestyle than what you would normally expect somebody who was chopping up people or and burying them in the woods would do?
Yeah, I guess so. It's funny though, now that the tables have turned, right? With like American Psycho, it's like you look at like, the guy who's the most prim and proper, and you're like, oh, that's the serial killer, okay,
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Will, do you got any like weird Native American legends or experiences that you can speak with us about?
Weird legends, Native American legends? I don't think they exist. No, I'm just kidding.
No, there's a huge one. We were going to do this one, but we were going to save it. We're trying to get Chiller TV to let us do another one, and one of them is Wendigo. The Wendigo story?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so not only, it's like if you happen to eat somebody, suddenly you'll be possessed by this beast. Your eyes will get red, you'll grow white hair, and you'll get really long nails and fangs, and you'll have an insatiable thirst for human flesh. And of course, the real story of that is that guy in, I think it was Manitoba, Canada, who he was on a bus. And
I know the story, yeah.
He was sitting next to a juggalo, and he chopped the guy's head off, and he ran up and down the bus saying that he was possessed and he was going to eat this guy, and he started eating like his tongue and his eyes, and all the passengers, the bus pulls over, all the passengers are puking and throwing up, and the passengers run out, and, the police had to come and he's running up and down the bus with this head. Fucked up.
Yeah, cannibalizing it, and he was a Native American guy, right?
He was, you have to forgive me because, coming from New York, I don't know, but what is it, a hung? H-U-N-G, or?
I don't know.
I thought he was, because I remember that story, I thought he was, they said he was of, I don't know if the best way to put it, like, maybe either Eskimo or Oriental, like, from the Far East type, like that.
Yeah.
Not necessarily,
I forget what it is, and maybe one of your viewers can help us, but it's like there's a whole bunch of this kind of ethnographic group of people who live in the Minnesota area and all that, and I think it begins with an H, and so, but by the way, this Wendigo thing where we talk about how urban legends have some form of truth behind it, there really is this thing called the Wendigo psychosis, where it's this thing where if you eat somebody, you almost convince yourself, that you have this insatiable thirst. And so it happens to the Aborigines, because the Aborigines, in a very respectful way, sometimes eat the bodies or hearts or brains of their loved ones in an effort as some kind of respect thing. But sometimes something bad happens, and they'll feel like they're possessed by an evil spirit, and then they'll turn to the chief and say, "You've got to kill me. I'm being possessed by this, by this beast," and that's called Wendigo psychosis. It's like when you go mad because you think you've eaten, somebody like in the Andes or on a desert island.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've got to look into a little bit more of that, because that type of stuff actually does fascinate me, like the things that little things like that psychosis and stuff like that where people actually have that type of stuff. That's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's a real like clinically defined state, and it's called the Wendigo psychosis, often Native American mythical beast, the Wendigo. And of course, when you were out on the plains or the Donner Pass or what have you, if you're going to starve to death, and there's somebody next to you who's, fat, plump, and juicy, hey, fry up a couple steaks,
Well, I don't know if you heard. I don't know if you heard our filthy episode last week, but we had. I don't even know if I should bring it up. We had a girl call in. We were interviewing an adult film actress, right? Yeah, we're all over the place with our interviews, and we got on the subject of cannibalism, and we got on the subject of oral sex with her, and if the oral sex is complete and the woman swallows, basically, is that considered cannibalism? And she was just like, you know what, that's really weird, because I know, like, she was just I swallowed like 10 guys, and I got sick to my stomach and shit my brains out. And I'm like, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Maybe that's your body telling you shouldn't be doing that. But really cool chick. But going back to the cannibalism thing, it's kind of like you talk about that movie Alive. What would you do to survive? Will, real quick, do you have any Native American legends that you want to talk about?
Well, the Wendigo idea is similar to that. Wendigo is mostly a northern Native American thing, Canada, stuff like that. Ours is similar, but not with the cannibalism aspect. It's skinwalkers. I don't know if you've ever. I know someone has probably heard of it in New Mexico. It does possess you, can take you over. You can be cursed from someone else, but cannibalism not necessarily in with that. And the interesting thing is, legends are not always easy to research when it comes to Native Americans, because they don't like to mess with that stuff. If you mess with that stuff, you're inviting it in, and you make it more prevalent in your life. And so, a lot of it I've gotten from my family, where it goes back to the legend aspect. A lot of it is something happened, and the legend is born, and the legend is designed to keep kids inside at a certain hour.
Right. So no different from the regular urban legends, because they're all cautionary tales. Don't make out at Lover's Lane, you're going to get hooked, or don't, do this or don't do that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think there's it's like a cops type TV show. I don't know what channel it's on, but they're on the reservation. It's like Navajo Cops or something like that. Have you seen that, Will?
National Geographic. Yeah, it's a great show, actually.
It's a great show, but cops get out, Josh, cops get called out to people's houses who say they've seen a skinwalker, and the cops have to investigate it. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
They think that yeah.
It's because it's so ingrained in legend, and because with home, back home, it's a real thing. If it is a real thing to them, then the police have to investigate it. It's part of their job. And there is one episode that actually does show something that's very unique, and whether or not it's an actual skinwalker or what it is, they don't find out, but it disappears. And they have to go after it. They have to look for it. The paranormal is something that does really exist on the reservation, and the cops are part of the group to look for it and find it.
Sure.
Oh, that's very interesting. Hey, Will, but have you read a lot of Stephen King, where Stephen King always brings it back to the Native Americans?
Oh yeah, that was one reason I like Stephen King quite a bit, especially like Pet Sematary. I think that if I remember correctly, it's towards the burial ground is the Native American burial ground where they bring them all back, right?
Of course, yeah.
I love Stephen King. I've read.
My wife just got done reading Dr. Sleep, by the way, his latest book.
I picked up Dr. Sleep. It's scary.
Yeah, she's like, it made her go back and read The Shining. And
oh, right. So there we go. The Shining 2, Native American, right? If you watch Room 237, it's all about Native American. And that's why The Shining is the scariest Stephen King movie.
For sure.
Which, you know what, it made it even more scary after watching that documentary. It's the documentary that made it even more horrifying. It's like, oh, this might be his message about about the awful slaughter. That was great.
Yeah, that was good.
We're going to take a 5-minute break. We're going to play some commercials. Josh, can you stay on with us for a little longer?
Sure, of course, yeah.
Okay, cool. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be back. Thanks for tuning in. You guys give us a call, 619-924-0762. We'll be back. We're back with Josh Zeman, director, documentarian of films such as Urban Legends, Cropsey, and some stuff he's working on about a whale. We played that Cropsey. We played that Burning trailer for you because the killer in that movie was named Cropsey. I don't know if you've ever seen the Burning.
That's right.
So I was like, that sounds fitting.
Now,
so
you know the story of the Burning, right?
Tell me about the story of the Burning.
Well, the Burning was, if I'm not mistaken, it was directed by Bob Weinstein, of the Weinsteins. And so basically that was the first movie that the Weinstein brothers had ever made. And one of the brothers directed it and the other brother produced it. And this huge Hollywood agent named Brad Gray was the line producer. And all, the three people who, made that movie literally kind of, run Hollywood at this point. Now, what's interesting is that they got the idea for that movie from the Jewish sleepaway camp that they went to, where there was an urban legend called Cropsey. And that same Jewish sleepaway camp monster named Cropsey is the same guy who the same story that migrated down to Staten Island to become the Cropsey that we know. Basically, we just took the name Cropsey from this Jewish sleepaway camp urban legend and attached it to this mental patient. You could have used the name to anything, but we just called it Cropsey.
That's amazing, man.
That is, man.
But it all goes back to so many people, whether it's myself or Charles B. Pierce, the guy who did The Town That Dreaded Sundown, and before that did the hugely popular Legend of Boggy Creek, or the Weinsteins, or whomever. A lot of directors, the first movies that they make are urban legends that they heard as kids.
Wow.
I could see that. There's been I've been fascinated as far as directing type stuff, writing, and I've thrown with Aaron here a few times, wanting to make a film based off of some of the stuff that we've had around here. Never really going off of the fact like that. It's just something I've always wanted to do. So hearing things like this, it's it kind of, I guess, I don't know if it would be all hacky and say it's a little inspiring, but it's always something that is fascinated me. Have you ever had anything do you have anything as far as creating where you're just there's something you've always wanted to tackle on film, but you're either well, I don't know if I'm there yet to be able to talk about this or to be able to film this or create a story about it yet? Is there anything that you've always wanted to cover but haven't quite been able to do?
Well, there was something that we touched upon in Cropsey that I wish we had made Cropsey 2 immediately after, and that's the devil worshipping stuff.
Yeah.
For me, growing up in the 80s, it was always about devil worshipping. And the craziest thing is we go back to Geraldo again. Geraldo, at this place, Willowbrook Mental Institution, not only did he break open the story of Willowbrook and kind of break open and did this huge expose of what was happening at Willowbrook. But the guy comes back 20 years later and makes, he's the guy who basically started so much of the satanic panic that we had in the 1980s, which comes back into play when a lot of the searchers were going through Willowbrook and they were seeing 666 painted or this or that, and they were saying, oh, it's devil worshiping, Andre Red's devil worshiper. So that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do the devil worshiping thing, and Cropsey was the entree to that, and I think that's partly one of my next projects is this devil worshiping.
It's funny. We have every town you go to has its satanic thing, and I don't know, Sean, you may remember this. Sean's about 30. I'm about 37 or 31, right, Sean?
Right. Yeah.
So when I was a kid, there was this legend that there's a satanic church here in town called the Purple Gates. Do you remember that, Will?
Yes, I remember that. That was high school, and it was there was all kinds of stuff that went along with it, they had phone numbers you could call, and they said it was Purple Gates. I believe it was in the mountains, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so apparently there's a satanic church called the Purple Gates, and that obviously brings up a lot of, like you said, the satanic panic of the 80s. And what we usually find out, it's just rebellious teens, right? I mean, I think the FBI even just said there's really no validity to any of this. Mass sacrifices or whatever the case may be. But yeah, the Purple Gates, man, that was a funny one. And like I said, New Mexico is a plethora of just weird shit, man. I would encourage you, if you're going to ever do a documentary or travel, definitely come through here, there's some weird things down here, for sure.
Well, I have to admit, I too took a hit of acid. I took it at White Sands, trying to have my own Jim Morrison type of thing. So I admit that.
Yeah. Well. Okay. So you've been to New Mexico.
Yeah, for White Sands.
Sure. We have a fan on of yours. Her name is Fly. She wants to give you some kudos.
Awesome.
Hey, Fly. You're on the phone with Josh Zeman.
Hi. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good.
Good.
What's going on?
I grew up not much. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I remember the stories about Cropsey circulating, and the neighbors waggling their fingers. You better watch it. Don't go out with that crowd. Stay away from there. Cropsey will get you.
Oh, excellent! I'm glad you remember it. And then there's of course Cropsey Avenue in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah. And the first time I watched The Burning, I found it absolutely hysterical that they used the name Cropsey. I was like nudging my boyfriend in the arm going, oh my God, it's Cropsey!
Yeah.
So he had absolutely no clue.
Have you, Fly, you've seen Cropsey? How'd that movie make you feel? I mean, did it scar your soul as much as it did mine with Geraldo's footage?
I was nauseous. I just felt sick to my stomach. It just was just some of the most disturbing shit I've ever seen.
And so, Sly, let me ask you a question. When they said, be careful, Cropsey's going to get you, what was Cropsey? Like, who was Cropsey to you?
It was basically the neighborhood, I guess, lack of a better term, and it's used frequently as boogeyman.
Right.
Right. My uncle used to say, I go and play in the playground, and he's like, you see don't go hang out with those kids. They're bad, and Cropsey's got his eye on them. Like, whoa.
Huh.
Yeah, okay, I'm just gonna sit here and watch TV then.
That's funny.
It was.
The whole thing was that it was just a name that they used to prevent, that parents used to prevent you from like hanging out with the bad kids, or like if you're out on the street corner at night, which technically in the summer you were, 9:30 hanging out on the street corner. But if you were on the street corner, Cropsey was going to get you. He was going to
Yeah, if you weren't home on time, if you went over there, if you got out of my parents' sight, Cropsey was going to get you. You got to obey your parents. If you go and do bad shit, that was the name.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's
and
crazy.
Sly, was there any and where in Brooklyn?
Bensonhurst.
Right. And did they ever bring up Son of Sam?
Oh, that was always talked about. And, my family was like, oh, they got him. They totally got him. I still don't think it was one person, though.
It wasn't. It was definitely more than one person. That's part of the devil worshiping thing.
Yeah.
And if anybody ever gets a chance, there's a book called The Ultimate Evil that I highly suggest that everybody reads. And it's basically about how there was more than one person involved in the Son of Sam killings. And a lot of that got back to Staten Island. The interesting thing about it, and there's a lot of folklorists who talk about it with us, is that in Brooklyn, or when you lived in the city and you had some kind of a piece of abandoned lot, it was a lot where a house had been knocked down or a place that hadn't been developed, and it was like a little shortcut that you went home from school. That's where the bums hung out, or that's where you got beaten up for your lunch money, or that's where a body was found, or somebody got raped, or they found a body or something like that. And so when a lot of those people moved from Brooklyn to Staten Island in the late 70s, early 80s, you know, they always thought of like the abandoned lots and the green areas as something horrific. Suddenly all these people get to Staten Island, and Staten Island is filled with green. So suddenly they're like, holy shit, there's all this green and all these terrible things must happen. And you wouldn't think, well, don't worry about it, it's going to be fine, it's just a green area. But actually when they went in, they found these abandoned mental institutions. So for all those people who moved from Brooklyn to Staten Island, the legend became real, because all those terrible things that happened in the woods really did happen in the woods, and that's why they got even more freaked out.
It's funny. I was talking to my dad, and I was telling him that I was going to be interviewing you. And my dad's from Brooklyn. Yeah, he made his way to New Mexico, probably doing the same Jim Morrison thing you were doing. So, so he was I was telling him I was interviewing you, and he was telling me about the fact that he remembers being in Brooklyn in the 70s, and when a lot of these institutions closed down for lack of whatever, funding, you know, mistreatment, whatever, these people were now roaming the streets. And he
they
said,
pretty much opened the doors and let them out.
Yeah, and
exactly.
he just said, he just said it was like, it wasn't like that, you know, when he grew up. My dad was born in 1950, so you didn't have that. They shielded the kids in the 50s and the 60s, and then when the mid-70s hit, he just says you just seen a plethora of just insane homeless people, you know, and it's because they shut down these things, you know, they shut down these institutions. And it's scary. I was telling Sean about how one thing leads to another when I was researching your documentary and watching some footage. I was looking for that footage that Geraldo had said or had put out on YouTube, and right away there was linked an old, and I think I had showed it to you, Fly, an old documentary from 1981 or 2 called Children of Darkness. Do any of you guys remember that?
Jesus.
Vaguely. I know, I saw it.
It's on YouTube, and it basically
goes when it goes. Yeah, and just people are just sitting on the floor, laying on the floor. It's enough to make you sick.
Well, it even goes to show, like in 1981, that mental institutions, that these kids weren't not being treated properly, or they were just strapping them down, or in some cases were flat out being antagonized by the help just to see them freak out. You know what I mean? And it's a really sad documentary, but it also goes into kids who have schizophrenia, you know, and then kind of like you said, Josh, about that guy who was put in the mental institution that just had cerebral palsy. There was another guy they were interviewing, and he's just like, yeah, my parents just dropped me off here, and they never returned. I got a letter from Las Vegas saying, have a good life.
I mean, that's the whole thing, you know. You know, they were encouraged, don't ever come back. It won't help your kid. So drop them off, don't ever come back. And all these people grew up in this mental institution. Then deinstitutionalization happens, and suddenly, you know, they're let out, basically. They were like bused to Times Square and let out. And so what do these people do? In the case of Willowbrook, some of them made their way back to Staten Island. They made their way back to their homes, and they lived in the abandoned mental institution. I mean, what the hell else are you going to do? But that's how we got a lot of the homeless issue, you know, problems that we have, that we had back in the day. Thankfully, that doesn't really happen now, but, you know, back in the day, it was crazy.
Wow. The part you were talking about, how you're saying you wanted to go back and maybe do one for talking about like the devil worship, and even when we were discussing you know, the son of Sam and the devil worshiping, you know, type of stuff there, that part always seems to have scared me more. Like I've told Aaron here, and I've told my friends, once again, I'm not scared by horror movies, but it's the things like, and I'm not even scared of things like ghosts. I'm more scared of like things like that, witchcraft practicing, magic things, because sometimes I do truly believe that sometimes people mess with things they don't understand are bigger than that. And one of the things that we would have here is like, you know, especially like from where I am, everything's cool. But one of I used to work at a cab company, and I had this lady who was a coworker of mine. I just thought she was kind of crazy and stuff. She would always talk, just make insane accusations and always like threaten people and stuff. And for a while there, everything was cool until she started like, getting arguments with me and stuff. And I would just like call her out on her stuff. And I didn't think twice about it until she started telling me she practiced like Santeria and stuff. And then at that point, I legitimately got scared for my life, thinking that this woman was going to find some way to put some type of voodoo hex or something like that on me. And I don't know what it is about that type of those things, but it just terrifies me. And that's kind of like you said, if you wanted to do a second part with that part of the documentary really hit a nerve with me, because it's like, yeah, that's where all this stuff sometimes goes, and it always goes back to that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Again, ghosts, don't believe it. But, devil worshippers and real people who, mess with shit or, get in a mental space that's, really dark, that's what freaks me out. And so while we were making Cropsey, basically the New York Police Department would say to us, and as you see in the movie, the NYPD, real detectives with 20-year veterans, they're sitting here saying, this isn't really about this, it's about devil worshipping. And I'd be like, are you guys fucking joking me? Devil worshipping? We're talking about kids going out with their Metallica albums, writing 666 and burning cats. That's not devil worshipping. And they kept saying to me, no, you don't understand. This is real. And in fact, there were some instances in Staten Island where it wasn't just kids, writing 666. There were some real shit going down in Staten Island with devil worshipping. Now, it's not like people conjuring the devil. It's people getting in, bad things, murder, child prostitution, drugs, and all that under the auspices of devil worshipping,
Getting into that headset that they're doing something and, trying to be the embodiment of evil. It's all in their head, but would you trust that person? Hell no.
No. Yeah, those are the people who do crazy shit that you can't, reason with, And you can't reason your way out of it, and that's what kind of freaks me out.
Yeah, and speaking of, I guess you could say the witch hunt, devil worshipping thing, I had just watched The Devil's Knot. It's a feature film. It's not a documentary, but it's based off of the murders of those three boys in West Memphis, Tennessee, the West Memphis Three. And I've seen all the documentaries, Paradise Lost 1, 2, and 3, and the movie pissed me off more because they really laid out the fact how everything was bungled up and how the police were under pressure to look for a killer. So they look for these kids who are metalheads, who one of them has an interest in witchcraft, and it's like a modern-day fucking witch hunt. And these guys were locked in prison for 17 years for nothing they didn't do.
Yeah. It's a travesty of justice, and the fact that those boys lost their youth.
Yeah.
In jail.
Have you seen those, Josh, those movies?
Seen them. Paradise Lost was literally the inspiration for Cropsey. And I get a little bit of flack for that. Some reviewer was like, they wanted to remake Paradise Lost. I was wickedly inspired by Paradise Lost. Watching the opening credits of that movie, seeing that horrific footage, but yet at the time, listening to Sanitarium, and I went through my own Metallica phase, that, fucking totally hit home for me, It was, it's about people assigning blame to, a group when it's unwarranted, it's about that whole devil worshipping thing. That was what Cropsey was about, for me. But, and I met the director, and I was, got down and kissed his feet, I was just, to me, that was everything. Paradise Lost was everything.
Yeah, the new feature film that came out, like I said, called The Devil's Knot. Is a very well put together movie. I mean, it's a feature film, like I said, but you guys should check it out if you get a chance to. I know it's hitting theaters here pretty soon. Now, Josh, I wanted to bring up with you. We got about another half hour with you or so. I wanted to bring up a local legend that I was involved in that ended in tragedy. And I say that I was involved in because all the kids are doing this. Growing up, you hit your youth, and you go, your preteens, and then your teenager, and then eventually, you're 15, 16, and you're hanging out with friends who are driving cars. Now, there was a story out of a man that they called Crazy Larry. Okay, and everybody was like, "That's Crazy Larry's house." Now, this was an urban legend that was true. Now, the thing is they say Crazy Larry was a Vietnam vet who had, obviously, as we know now, PTSD. And if you drove by his house and you flashed your lights into his window and yelled Crazy Larry, he'd come outside with a gun, dressed up in like a Michael Myers type coverall suit, and jump in his souped-up station wagon and chase you. Okay? Well, the thing about it is, with Crazy Larry, it was true. Crazy Larry existed, and we would Crazy Larry, and then we would drive off. This gentleman had spotlights in front of his house, so if you pulled up to the curb, the lights would go off. He had cameras in front of his house, and the guy did, in fact, have a souped-up station wagon, and he would drive through parks trying to chase you. Well, what happened in September 7th of 2005, a 17-year-old, and keep in mind, this is 10 years after I was pulling this shit, maybe a good 12 years after I was pulling this shit. A kid was driving in front of his house yelling Crazy Larry. This gentleman, he stood in, his name was Glenn Lewis, whose name wasn't Crazy Larry, stood in front of the kid's car, and the kid ran him over and killed him. Yeah. And you guys can Google Crazy Larry Albuquerque, and you could read the journal, you could read everything. And it was just, talking to you is just, bringing up all these crazy local legends. But, man, I mean, definitely research it, Josh. I think it would be really cool for you to take a look at it. But, yeah, crazy.
Well,
if you just...
And that's a movie. That's a documentary right there, to me. It's very, a neo-realistic, tragic documentary, but, where kids just take an urban legend and just go too far with it. But very interesting.
Well, it was going by, it was generational, so you got, my older sister who's like, oh, don't drive by Crazy Larry's house, and, and so it's generational as it was going, and it so happened that, this guy was probably being harassed for a good 18 years, and then eventually he stood in the street because his kid did it, and the kid ran him over and killed him. And it's just a tragic, crazy story, but I thought I'd bring that up to you, and me and Sean wanted to bring up some local legends to you.
No, that one's pretty good because, again, so folklorists call it ostension. It's where you try, it's what happens with that one story that we do in Killer Legends about Halloween candy, where, there's no real evidence of anybody ever being killed via Halloween candy. There's no instances of anybody ever dying by a stranger giving Halloween candy. However, this one guy in 1974 in Texas, he wants to poison his own kid and get the insurance money. So how is he going to do it? He is going to give his kid a poison pixie stick and say that some stranger did it. Why? Because he hears all these urban legends about strangers giving out poison candy. And so the kid takes the huge pixie stick, eats it, it's filled with cyanide, he dies, and the guy blames it and says, oh, he got it from some house, it must have been what's called a Halloween sadist, and, it's just a tragedy. Thankfully, the cops managed to know that it never really happened, and they're like, sorry, bro, it's an urban legend. You're busted. And the guy, the guy never admitted it, but he went to jail and died. But what happens is, years later, people say, well, it's just, that urban legend is true. Look, here's a case of it. And the only reason that the urban legend became real is because the guy believed it, because the guy enacted on it. And that's called ostension. And that's what happened in your case as well. Like, it was an urban legend until, you know, it was an urban legend, but it became real when Crazy Larry got killed, and now, you know, people are going to be like, oh, the ghost of Crazy Larry is going to get you.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And then it'll have a real legitimate story behind it. Yeah, you know, you went to this house and this Crazy Larry actually got killed, and now Crazy Larry's ghost is going to get you, and now you're going to totally believe it because you go on Google and you Google it, and then for sure, look, it really fucking happened. You know?
Yeah, and he would chase people. He would shoot. There's people who had bullet holes in their car. He would shoot at you. It was no shit. It was. I mean, it was crazy.
Well, of course, after 18 years of fucking kids yelling your name, Crazy Larry, you probably
right.
Yeah, I would be sitting on my patio with a shotgun myself.
The guy would sit in his car on a Friday night or a Saturday night, tinted windows, on a station wagon, and everybody swears it was souped up because it would fucking haul ass. One of those old kind of like Griswolds from Family Vacation station wagons, and it was almost like that old 70s movie, The Car, where you drive up to his house and all of a sudden his freaking brights would go off. You'd go like, run, it's Crazy Larry! You know, so like, and he would like seriously chase people down. Poor guy though. I mean, and again, like I said, I was one of those people who did that too, and it sucks. It sucks, but it would definitely be something that you would here. It would be really cool for you to kind of take a look at. Sean, did you want to talk to him about La Llorona?
Well, yeah, there's La Llorona, which is our local like urban legend of the weeping woman. But I've heard this legend. They base it here, but I've also heard it a lot of different places put, which is basically a story of a woman who gets scorned by the boyfriend or the husband or the guy that she really loved, and she drowns her children in the river, only to then realize what she's done. While trying to save them, she ends up drowning, and then the local legend is that you can't go to the river at night or say her name at night near the rivers because she's constantly looking for her children and she'll take them from you. And that's one of the bigger legends that we've had here in New Mexico. I can't tell you how many people here know. They always like testing the things. I've had a lot of friends that have said, we're going to take a video camera down there and say her name 3 times or whatever, or they've just had tales of hearing a woman weeping or calling for her children out at the river at night. And it fascinates me to want to see if like what initially brings something like that up. Do you have anything that's kind of like that, or have come across anything that's almost like stories like that, as far as like a ghostly woman snatching people up like that?
Well, there's a couple. First of all, when you said it to me, I wonder if there really is a case of a woman murdering her children. Number
Right.
one. Because that's exactly why an urban legend would be created, which is to create an answer of a tragedy that has no rhyme or reason. Mm-hmm. And this still is very pervasive in society today, is it not? The woman who drowns her children. Like every couple of years, there'll be a case of a woman who drowns her children, right?
Yeah,
and
Andrea Yates
so look
in the bathtub.
Yeah, exactly. Or
wasn't there
the
one
woman who drove
maybe a year ago?
Yeah,
was that the bathroom?
there's
or the woman who drove the car?
Yeah.
It seems like there's one every couple of years or so. It's
Right.
funny that you say this, Josh, because this is old. This is ancient. I mean, this is grandparents telling these stories to us. I remember, my grandparents are gun past World War II vets, used to tell these stories to us. So that's how far it goes back. So you got to imagine, especially in New Mexico, with the Spaniards, settling here and the Native Americans. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, and it's to kind of go back to what you were saying, Sean, where does it come from? My wife was doing a little bit of research on it as well, and what she found out, and it's funny that you say this, Josh, about women doing this, it all traces back to postpartum depression.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
it's crazy.
Well, the thing is, as you said, it's crazy, meaning we don't understand why. It makes no logical sense. You're a woman, you give birth to a child, you're supposed to love your children, it's the most natural thing in the world. Yet, there are some very strange cases where women have postpartum depression and suddenly drive the car into the lake or murder all 3 children in the bathtub. And it makes no sense. And so that's why we create an urban legend, which is to give some kind of scary story as an answer to what we don't understand. And so that's exactly what's happening here is, I'm sure, 100 years ago, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, whatever, some woman drowns her children and has no answer for it. And the only thing that we can do to try and make sense of it at all is to create a horrific story out of it, because at least a horrific story is a story. At least it's something, And of course, you postpartum depression in a male-dominated, patriarchal society, we don't know what the fuck these women are thinking. We have no idea, and so we're like, what? It doesn't make any sense. I don't understand it. She must be crazy, and so, we kind of create these stories, and you're so right. It is exactly postpartum depression and mental illness that technically we don't understand.
I have a question for you. One of our guys, somebody emailed you named Jeremy, or emailed us with a question. He's listened to the show live. He says, and this might be more prevalent on the West Coast, are the gangsters or the gang members driving around where their lights are off and waiting to be flashed, then shooting the person who flashed them? Do you know anything or any cases about this?
Of course. Well, this is like the huge one, the Good Samaritan, the gang member initiation one. It's huge.
Oh yeah, that's right. I also heard, I don't know if this was an East Coast thing, but I remember hearing that either it was Easter night or the day before Easter, or one of those things where it's like that's gang initiation night and you shouldn't go out because that's when they like doing things like that. So I don't know if it's just a coastal thing or if they have it in different types of areas under a different situation.
Well, it's like a white thing, a bunch of uppity white people like afraid of this narrative. But here's the funny thing, ostension again. It's a total bullshit urban legend. No, it doesn't fucking happen. Nobody's doing that. Yet a couple gangbangers are like, wait a second, maybe we should do this. Maybe we should go out and do this. So it has no basis in reality until the gangbangers are like, wait a second, let's fuck some people up because they're flashing their lights at us. Maybe we should. And so suddenly it gets reinforced as being real when it never was real to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank God for Snopes.com to help me be able to sift those so-called legends out. I love that website.
It's a pretty good website.
Snopes.com. Going back to urban legends. I know that Chiller played it I guess on a Sunday, and they only played it twice. When are people going to be able to get another viewing of that? When's it going to be, video on demand or?
It probably will come out in July. But what I will tell people is if they go to Facebook, if they go to the Cropsey Facebook, they can order the film.
Oh, cool.
There's a bunch of deleted scenes, and if you've seen Cropsey, also there's 30 minutes of deleted scenes on the DVD of Cropsey, and they should order that as well. Because some of the deleted scenes I think are the most amazing. It just kind of didn't fit in the movie, but there's some crazy-ass deleted scenes from Cropsey that are unbelievable. And so check those out. Check the deleted scenes of Killer Legends. And the one thing I do want to talk about very quickly is internet urban legends. Because we have this thing, this digital campfire called the internet, where we all sit around late at night and we all talk to each other over this, digital campfire. And so what we're going to be seeing now in the future are all these urban legends propagated over the internet. And the biggest one that I find really wicked interesting is Slender Man. Do you guys know about that
Slender
one?
Man, yes. I love Slender Man.
My children play, what's the game, Minecraft, and I think there may be a Slender Man in Minecraft, or I don't know. Oh, no, it's Enderman. He's like a rip-off of Slender Man. But either way, yes, I've gone to local comic book conventions and seen people dressed up like Slender Man, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
So this is new. Like, this is not, when did Slender Man come around, and how did Slender Man come around? And Slender Man is interesting because he's born of the internet. And if you notice, the proof of Slender Man are all these digitally manipulated photoshopped images where, like, you take a normal scene and you're like, oh my God, look in the background, there's Slender Man. And it's the same process that a lot of these, like, urban legend horror movies use, where, like, the film like Lake Mungo or wherever, where you're like watching it, and there in the way back you'll see it, somebody walking through frame, and they show it to you, and you're like, oh my God, what was that? And so we've kind of we've moved on to like what is proof, to this idea of what is proof of the urban legend in the digital age, and that is the photoshopped image of Slender Man in these other photos, and kids love to do this manipulation and then throw it up on the internet and then see who believes, which is the same thing as just me telling you that it really happened, except now it's just like a slightly more creditable version, and that's the way that urban legends work. Urban legends, no matter every discussion of an urban legend, all the discussions that we're having here tonight, the more credible that discussion is, it doesn't demystify the urban legend. It actually makes it more real. It makes it more tangible and sticky and scary. And that's what I love about urban legends, the fact that you can't take the power away. You can only add to it.
It's funny. Go ahead.
I was going to add on top of that. I take the kind of the same thing with urban legends as I do with like conspiracy theories. I've looked a lot of things up on like through just Reddit and stuff like that, looking at things, and I consume them almost like you consume chips. I don't necessarily believe most of these urban legends, along with like conspiracy theories, but I love reading them because that part that goes in your brain, almost like when listening to ghost stories as a kid, where you're like, well, what if it's real? And you have these proof, and people have their facts and everything like that, and you're just like, I don't know what to think, I don't know what to believe. It might be BS, but it's interesting to me. Have you ever had anything where it's like, is there anything on the internet? Especially nowadays, when you can get like videos, I wanna maybe say something like Live Leak, or how it used to be called Ogrish. Is there anything on the internet that you don't, that you're just kind of like, I can't look at that, I can't, or has there been anything where you're just like, I'm afraid of crossing over into that because it's just too much for me?
I don't know. I kind of throw that question back to you. Is there anything on your end that's just too much for you?
Actually, yeah. A couple of weeks ago, talking about this stuff, conspiracy theories and or urban legends like we're talking tonight. I look at a lot of different things. There's a lot of different, like, whether it be on Reddit or stumble upon through my phone. There's things that pop in, and one weekend something came to me and I took a look at it, and it was a Reddit subreddit that was called Watch People Die.
Oh, right.
And it almost reminded me of like the Faces of Death thing, because this is actual footage of people just dying, whether it be being hit by trains or military footage or whatever. And I went on it, but I couldn't get myself to click on any of the video links because there was a part in my brain that was kind of like, if I do this, I felt like I was crossing over into something that my mind couldn't come back from. It was just some. Yeah.
That you say that. Yeah, that I had a dream the other day where I had killed somebody, and I'm sorry guys, but I had a dream the other day where I killed somebody, and And I said to myself in my dream, oh my God, I've really done it this time. I've crossed over. Like all this kind of like exploration of death and gore and truth and non-truth, and I've really crossed the line over where I can't come back from. And that was the dream. And it was crazy. I really thought I had passed the point of no return. And so it was very much like that.
It's almost
creepy.
Yeah, you can't. It's your brain. It's funny, and you said you've never doing all these things that you've done, all the places that you've gone, checking out urban legends, investigating. Have you ever came upon something that you could not explain, whether it be paranormal? I know you earlier in the interview you mentioned you don't really believe in ghosts,
nope.
But you've never came upon anything.
No. Well, here's the thing. I totally don't believe in ghosts, but I believe in karma. You know, going to an institution where children have been tortured and intentionally given diseases and things, you cannot not understand and feel and believe that something is happening. You know, when we talked with Will before about, you know, the Native American Indians, like, that shit I believe. You know, I believe that, you know, when you slaughter, a group of people who are innocent and then, you know, build an institution on top of that, something is going to happen. I also believe in the power of urban politics, meaning Staten Island was a dumping ground. It was one of the largest mental institutions in the world. It was the garbage dump, which was the largest garbage dump in the world. Like, it was a sanitarium. It was, you know, all these things. I believe when you keep infusing that stuff into a community, shit is going to happen. And so, it's amazing to me that Willowbrook, before Willowbrook was, you know, a veterans hospital, you know, where all these people had PSD, and then it becomes, you know, a mental institution. And now, funny enough, Willowbrook is the College of Staten Island, one institution on top of another. And so I believe in that power fully and for sure.
So when you say the college, did they? I mean, you were in an abandoned building. Did they refurbish it or what?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Basically, a lot of those buildings are refurbished into now classrooms and college dorm rooms and shit like that. Not dorm rooms, but like the colleges and stuff like that. And in fact, one of the only buildings that's not redone is one of the buildings near where one of the bodies was found and where one of the campsites was.
It's kind of like here in Albuquerque, we have the oldest high school, 1700s, Sean, 1800s maybe?
Yeah. Albuquerque High.
Albuquerque High. Right smack down in the middle of downtown Albuquerque. Abandoned from the time when I was a little kid, and I'm 37 years old, and not until about 10 years ago. Somebody purchased the property, somebody went in, and they built beautiful lofts. Big, old, scary cobblestone brick building, and it still looks that way. And I knew somebody who lived in there, and he's like, "Man, there's just some weird, unexplained shit here. I can't explain it." And I'm just like, "Well,
that I believe." You
know?
It's like there's two things that brings to mind. You know, the Poltergeist. However you feel about the movie, you know, and he's like, you moved the gravestones, but you didn't move the bodies. Like, to me, that's like, aha, that's the moment, you know. And I say that a lot, and it happens, but that's not just like, that's part of urban politics as well. You know, when you have these, you know, areas that are undeveloped, and then somebody comes in and redevelops it into something else, but yet, you know, it kind of, you didn't move the bodies. And the same thing is true. A movie that watching Killer Legends, I came to appreciate quite a bit, and is actually absolutely brilliant, which is Candyman. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that film, where it talks about Cabrini Green and the fact that, you know, they made this movie Candyman about Cabrini Green, but at the time what was really happening in Cabrini Green was a lot of these phantom clown scares, where kids were seeing phantom clowns. And it was African American kids, in fact, were seeing phantom clowns, and they actually, some people say, oh, that's actually kind of goes back to this history of the Ku Klux Klan, and men dressed in sheets, kind of scaring African American kids. It's very, very interesting how that's. It's not. A lot of what we fear and a lot of like what we know, it's institutionalized. It's part of urban politics, if you know what I'm saying.
Exactly. And it goes way back. I mean, and you think of even Roman times of minotaurs and Greek in ancient Greece. You think of Medusa. These things we do more than likely are to scare ourselves into being straight, and a lot of us, love to be scared. We love that feeling of being scared because we also know that at the end of the night we're going to have a safe place to go home to.
That's right.
And it makes that safe place just that much better, knowing that you escaped this urban legend or death by the skin of your teeth. And it's kind of like almost like this cozy blanket comfort feeling. You get those people who say, man, I'm just going to lay in my bed and watch horror movies all day on the Sunday afternoon while it's raining, in my blankets, because it's a weird comforting feeling to people,
It is. The weird thing is that I would love to do, some kind of study where we go back and where, when you had like huge diseases like Black Plague and stuff like that, or when you had wars, where people were being tested every single day and where people were dying young, you didn't have horror films like you did today. And the horror films of today are kind of like, the touchstones of what really happened to us many years ago. And so when you don't have wars and when you don't have mass deaths because of this, you need to feel life in some other way. You need to celebrate life in some other way. And the way that you do that is by scaring yourself. It's an easy way to get there.
Is there any follow-ups that you had on anything else that came up out of? I know you had some extra features on your Urban Legends movie, but is there anything since the movie was done and wrapped up and printed? Has there been any follow-ups to anything at all?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that we're just trying to do another set of Urban Legends. We're trying to get Chiller to get us to do another round of it, and we want to do the Wendigo for sure, which I spoke about before. We'd like to do Slenderman. There's definitely a couple of other Urban Legends, and we'd love to hear from people. If you go to Cropsey and you go to the Facebook site, definitely tell us about your Urban Legends, because that was the thing about doing Cropsey. I went, 60 theatrical showings across the United States, and every place I went to, and did a Q&A, somebody would raise their hand and talk about the urban legend in their hometown. And just like you guys are doing now, to me that's so interesting. And I'm always looking for true cases, true examples. Like you talked about Crazy Larry. To me, that's something that I would go and make an episode about. Much in the same way of the community going out to Texarkana, Texas, and legend tripping to the place where it happened, watching the movie where it happened. So for me, those are what's really exciting, all these real instances of urban legends coming true. And so I encourage all of your listeners, if they can do that, please go to the site and tell us about what's going on in your own hometown.
For sure. And I hope you get picked up for a series or something, man. That'd be so awesome.
Me too.
You're good at your craft, man. I mean, just the cadence, the cadence of your voice when telling these stories while you're narrating it is phenomenal. And your editing of the music, and you're good at you're a good editor, all that shit, man. And you really know how to put a movie together to really creep people out and give you that chill up the spine. So I mean, you're a good guy, man, and I hope you get picked up on that. And if you do, you got to try to do Crazy Larry.
I will do. Let me tell you something. I will do Crazy Larry, because to me that's exactly what I'm talking about. The urban legend becoming real because we believed in the urban legend so much. So I love that story.
How's that Netflix going with that? Has Netflix really helped spread people watching or getting interested in Cropsey and stuff? Because I know with this day and age with stuff like Netflix and Hulu is it makes things a lot easier to consume. It's not like you could just go down and be turned on like back in the days of video cassettes where like maybe you know some guy who's like, hey, watch this, you know. Now you just can pull it up, you know.
Well, it's funny that you mention that because I mean, Netflix. You know, first of all, Netflix is really great for documentaries, obviously, and a lot of like the recent surge in people loving documentaries literally comes from Netflix. You know, that's where a lot of people get turned on to it. And man, if it wasn't for Netflix and Hulu, so many people wouldn't know about the film. And so I love it. You know, like we're like one of the top rated films on Hulu, thank God. And you know, we were just the other day, we were just on the Best of Netflix Twitter account. And so, you know, those places have really been a godsend to us, and the way that Cropsey's done on Netflix, I'm so happy about, you know, what's happened with that. It's amazing.
That's awesome, man. Do you have anything, Josh? We're going to wrap it up here, but do you have anything that you want to plug before we wrap things up?
No, just, you know, again, go on Facebook, go to Cropsey on Facebook, and, you know, if you haven't seen Killer Legends, if you don't have Chiller, you know, hit us up, and, you know, we can get you DVD, and if you haven't gotten the extras, there's a ton of DVD extras on Cropsey, there's a ton of DVD extras on our Killer Legends DVD, so just hit us up and, you know, you know, order it, and we'll get it to you. And, you know, I guarantee you'll be excited about it.
Awesome. And you guys, you can follow Josh on Twitter at Josh Zeman, Killer Legends. If you want to read up on it, again, the Facebook page, the Cropsey Facebook page. Also, you can find it on Chiller.com. Cropsey is available on Amazon and Netflix, or check out Cropsey
Hulu.
Legend. Yeah, Hulu. Check out CropseyLegend.com as well. Man, is there anything else that you wanted to throw out there to us or anything, man?
I just wanted to thank you guys. It was a great conversation
Absolutely.
about urban legends. I really appreciate it.
I hope you had fun.
I was telling Aaron this. I was so excited to be able to get you on here to talk about it because I love documentaries. I'm even though I don't have the equipment for it yet. I'm an aspiring like film guy. And so it's always great to have somebody on who's just got a good passion for this type of stuff with stuff that I enjoy. So thank you for being on the air with us, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Much appreciated.
Yeah, not a problem. If you in the future have anything that you want to promote, whatever the case may be, we'd love to have you on again. I hope it was a good experience for you.
It was great. I loved it. Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
All right, man. You take care, Josh.
Take
it was
care.
nice talking to you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great one.